Hey everyone, welcome to the Editor's Roundtable Conversation. My name is Kaitlyn Alley, director, editor, writer. I'll be your moderator for today. I love to tell stories from a few different angles, from directing narrative work, like my short film Pause Play, sponsored by Dolby and Ghetto Film School, to recently editing a doc short called In the Wake of Love. And right now I'm writing my first feature, a sci-fi neo-western. Today we're talking shop and unpacking some of our favorite TV shows with some incredible editors. Here to share their experiences are Stefanie Maridueña, ACE, and M. Brennan, ACE, from America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders.
Hello.
Next, we have Byron Smith, ACE, editor of Lucky.
Hey guys, great to see you.
Lauren Connelly, ACE, editor of Beef.
Hello.
And John Rafanelli, editor of Survival of the Thickest and Free Bert. Such a pleasure to be talking to you guys today with all these editors and their amazing experiences that they've had on these TV shows. So why don't we jump right into it? So first, for everybody, let's talk about editorial language. How do you come together and uncover it on a project? At what point does the edit begin to emerge and unfold?
So in the case of America's Sweethearts, listen, just generally, a lot of times you kind of, and especially like with documentaries, right? You have a lot of footage, it could depends on the documentary. It could be like a lot of archival footage, a lot of different assets that you can use in your edit. So a lot of it at the beginning is just kind of like looking at your footage and seeing, okay, like what do I have? What are the things that I like looking at? Things that keep coming up, like themes that are emerging in terms of like what a style it could be. So with America's Sweetheart, right off the bat, we noticed that everyone kept talking about like DCC world and how being a part of like the Dallas Cowboys cheerleading organization, it's this like dream world that these women are like constantly aspiring for. And it's like this world of perfection. So we really leaned into this whole like feminine, ethereal world. So when you watch the episodes, you see like a lot of the music, like the score. We played a lot with very like beautiful, like ethereal music that we could use. Like at some point I used the Normal People soundtrack had like some great sound that helped with that world building. Also like the Won't You Be My Neighbor documentary, Flow animated movie. So it's, you kind of, once you start like establishing that world that you're going for, you look for things that are similar to that in terms of music. And then just with the visuals, right? We are seeing that there's like a world that these women are aspiring for. So that also informs the way that we're using our footage, and especially like our specialty footage. We have some beautiful shots of the uniform and the Cowboy Stadium, like the AT&T Stadium. And so how can we use these in a way that we're like in the perspective of the women, like this is what they're aspiring for, in combination with, the music, sound effects, and then the sound bites. You kind of like create this world that they're all in. And that really helped establish this like editorial language that we have on the show.
To me, when I think about editorial language, to me, editorial language is literally story. Like I don't think of it as a cutting style, like a Cuddy style or like a artistic style. To me, it's like, what is the footage and the story we're trying to tell actually saying to us as the first audience, as the editor? So what is this story calling for? What are the right performances? What do we need to get across in this moment? And as you deep dive into story, that informs how you cut the scene, whether that be in a more artistic, indie style or a traditional style. It's what is the story you're trying to tell, and that informs it. And I think you start learning that right away. And I also think it's really important to be collaborative with your other editors, because that way you make sure you're all telling the same story across all the different episodes. So you kind of form that language together in the ideal scenario.
Yeah, Lauren, for me, editorial language is kind of similar. It's something you don't really impose on a project. It's something you kind of discover. It's something you uncover from the footage that you receive, no matter what kind of project it is. It's rather than it being something you impose. It's kind of like you use your intuition to help you support that story. And it is like your script is your content, and then the way you edit is your form. And the performances will begin to tell you what the piece that actually wants to be.
Yeah, I agree with both of those also, and especially when like shaping scenes, a lot of like how one scene ends bridges into the next one, and the flow is just like organic in the performance, and it's like I'll have two separate scenes and I don't know how they start or end until I put them together, kind of, and just like organically flow.
I'll bring it back to America's Sweethearts here. Often, I'd say things don't come together until pretty late in the process. There's so much footage, and they're usually continuing to shoot while we're first cutting. So there's a lot going on, and this type of documentary is so loose. It's pretty freeform, so we function as writers. So we're really like working the footage a lot. And it kind of doesn't happen until the very last moment. Pretty frequently, we don't really get it until the last few days. And when it hits. It's like all of a sudden, oh, there it is. That's what we're looking for.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was just thinking about how oftentimes we're editing episodes out of order, and like what that process is like when, even if you're starting on season 1 or you're starting on season 3, you might be editing episode 8 first before you edit episode 2. So and so like how do you guys work with the team, and like how do you communicate, trying to, like, I guess as you talked about, building that that language, that editorial language? How do you, like, do you guys have conversations together? Are you just watching and then you like Slack or whatever? Like, what's the vibe usually?
I mean, I love Slack. Such a nerd.
Slack's
I
the
love
best.
I really, you know why? It's because I hate texting. I'm really bad at texting, and like if you're texting me about work, it's going to get lost. And I love Slack. Anyway, no, it's like I think it goes back to what I was talking about a little bit ago. Is like I do think it's really important to have those conversations. On Beef, we cross-boarded all the episodes at once. We were getting things all out of order, and when you're trying to work with that large of an ensemble, you really need to understand all these detailed motivations and where you're going with each character and each couple, and how all these relationships are intertwined. And Laura Zempel and I, we talked all the time. We always were in each other's bays. We always were making sure we screened things for each other. If we had questions, it was really an open door policy, and ask anything. Let's look at everything together, make sure that we're presenting something really cohesive, on a first pass.
Yeah, Slack is also really helpful for us. Like it's kind of like our water cooler, and we have like different channels. So we have like the editors channel, and then we have our story channel. We get to talk to like all of our story producers, and that's like the most active one. And that's definitely where we're always throwing ideas. Like our story team, that's one of the first eyes on all the footage. They're always throwing in clips of like all sorts of things, like things that they find interesting. A lot of times it's just funny moments. But it's nice to see like how we're all able to have all these conversations and all be in on it. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, so-and-so said this. Like, do you mind checking with them? It's all in that channel. So we're all aware, usually, as long as we're checking it. But we're pretty good at that.
As a team, though, we all work on all of the episodes. And there might be sort of like a lead per episode, but we toss scenes back and forth to each other. And thankfully, the team on America's Sweethearts, we've all worked together on like multiple projects, and we've developed like a little bit of a hive mind situation. Yes. So we all like know each other's styles. We all have developed this style for this team. It's really kind of spooky, actually, when I think about it. But it works for us.
Yeah, Slack is a really great collaborative hub. It's something that can really happen when the pilot is starting. The pilot sets the tone, and a lot of concentration, and the producers focus on it. And then it's almost like they have to train the next editor, because sometimes people are isolated. But there have been projects that are really special that when I worked on House of Cards and Mindhunter, we would actually come together and spend a really long weekend and screen all episodes as one large movie. And it would really take a long day because we were pressing pause all the time. And
I hope you had snacks.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, and some bathroom breaks that were much needed. Yeah.
That's really awesome. You know, when I was on Gaslit, because that was another show that shot everything cross-bordered, we actually, as editors, got together every single week on Fridays and screened the scenes we were sending to the director every week together. So we made sure, like, as we were going, that things were aligned character-wise and that we were presenting him with, you know, the same style and performance, you know, choices. It was really helpful. It really makes for a better project the more you can just all be a team, whether you're on the same episodes or they're separate. Like if you work as a team, and you know, filmmaking is all about collaboration, you know, and so I truly believe that post should be really collaborative.
Yeah, and even like for me in a remote world, I try to make it a point to have, when I'm right like 2 days before I send my editor cut out, I try to make it a point to have everyone meet on Zoom or Evercast and play the episode down as if we were in person in a room together. Because like you were saying, Lauren, it is such a collaborative process. I don't have all the answers. Someone's going to come up with something and I'm going to build on that and ultimately make it better before I send it out. So I try to make sure that the first editor cut is screened with the whole post team or whoever can join, even in a hybrid remote world where we can't just walk into the next room over now, you know?
Man,
Okay.
you know when something isn't working when
Yeah.
you're in front of anybody. You're like, ooh.
Yeah.
I'm watching the
That
little
wasn't a good
tiles on the Zoom to see if someone's laughing or not.
Okay, so now we're gonna jump into some individual questions, and then there'll be like in the middle there'll be like some group questions, and then we'll go back to individual questions. All right. So first one's for Stefanie. So Stefanie, audiences may have preconceived notions of who the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders are and what they might represent watching the series and getting to hear from them personally. Were there editorial decisions you made specifically to challenge those notions?
So I think, again, us coming into this world, we didn't really know what to expect ourselves. We had never seen the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader organization is actually very private. They had the reality show before called Making the Team, and that was again like a reality show. So a lot of the storylines were, you know, edited in that way, and the women didn't always feel like they were represented in the way that they should have been. But in the case, so for us as a documentary, we are really just documenting what we're seeing. And our team is fantastic on the field where they really get to know the women and make them feel comfortable, earn their trust. And as part of that, in the edit is translated, right? Like we know that they've earned our trust and like we want to make sure that we put out this best representation of them. So as we're going through the process of watching down the footage, we learned that they are very impressive women. So right off the bat, we were like, wow, these women are not just like dancers. They're professionals, they're students. We had like season 1, there was an orthodontist that was like trying out for the show. So it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision to like, let's spotlight these aspects of the women because it was easy to do so. Like it was just part of the story. We saw that the women were doing these 9-to-5 jobs, some of them multiple jobs, and then also being Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders on top of that, right? And that already was really impressive that they were able to balance all of that. But then it was just like also looking at the sport aspect of it, where a lot of people don't think of cheerleaders as athletes, right? And I think something that's really well done with our show is that we spotlight the athleticism that it requires to be on the team, how intense it is, the type of endurance that you need. So that's another way that we also, again, it wasn't intentional because we're just documenting what their lives are actually like, what training camp is like, what it's like to be in the season where they're dancing on game day for like 8 hours straight on their feet dancing. So it was organic to what we were doing, right? We were just showing them, like showing the audience what we see. And I think it's really special to that we were able to spotlight them in that way, because I do think that it's changed the way that people see them. And it's been really helpful in like just kind of like making them human, right? I think a lot of people, another thing with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders is they're seen as these like perfect, immaculate people that are always smiling. And in season 2, we really explored like what are the implications and like the negative implications of being in a world like that. And a lot of them, you know, deal with mental health issues and have to like deal, you know, with pushing back against these like pressures of always having to be perfect. So it was really interesting to like also spotlight that and shine a light on, you know, the real struggles that they go through, and again, humanize them for the wider audience.
I found it was really interesting that the show dove into the home life as well. Like the camera was literally set up in their houses, and when I went in and I was watching, I was expecting it to be like just on the field or
Yeah.
in the rooms of, you know, of the Dallas Cowboys buildings, but it really dove a lot deeper than I was expecting it to. So I went in with my own preconceived notions about what I thought it was going to be. So, if you could talk a little bit more about like that personal aspects, you talked about humanizing them, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. We've worked as a team since, like, I've been on this working with One Potato since the second season of Cheer. I also worked on Last Chance U basketball with them. M has worked on Wrestlers and also, you know, on America's Sweethearts. So the style generally, I think, with Greg Whiteley, our director, is to be very intimate. Again, it's part of that like process of gaining their trust of their subjects. And it really helps to like have them open up. Our crew on the field is very small, so it's like, you know, they're in the house, but it's not like a whole team with lighting and all of that, you know. But I think what's really important, especially it being a sports show, that I always think about, right? Like you can always watch a sport. You can turn on your TV and watch basketball or football. And what makes an audience invested in it is kind of knowing like the behind the scenes. So that's where we learn our cheerleaders' motivations and their goals, and getting a sense of that is what then how we're able to get our audience to become invested in them. And also that creates a lot of like inherent what's it called, like suspense, right? Suddenly now you are cheering for this rookie candidate that you don't know if she's going to make the team, and you're following this process. And then once the team is made, one of the things that we do is, you know, there's like seeing what are the themes from the whole, you know, like that we started like laying the ground on during training camp that continue to reverberate through the rest of the season, like the NFL season. So for example, with season 2, we started seeing the women started like talking about how they were unhappy with pay and how that was, they felt like they weren't being, you know, valued. And starting in training camp, we start like seeing how the leader, Jada, the group leader from first group, I think, or she was like third group leader, is already kind of like has like this disruptive energy to her. Her personality is kind of like ready to kind of like bring, you know, challenge in this world that not so long ago was very against like challenging authority. So planting seeds like that, then we see the story develop throughout to the point where eventually they do ask for like a new contract. We don't think that they're going to get what they want. And then like at the very end of the season, literally on the last like 10 minutes of the episode 7, we learned that they got their raise. So it's like building up these like little moments where you get to like know the, you know, the characters and like unfolding the layers. It's not unfolding the layers. This is why my ears go. Peeling the onion. Thank you. You're like peeling the onion, right? And revealing little by little more about these people, more about, again, like I said before, the motivations, what informs like their decision making and why they're behaving the way that they do. You get to learn from being like intimate with them and earning their trust, and then really getting to know them in this way.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's roll into the next question. This one's for M. So, for America's Sweethearts, you guys balance the spectacle of one of the world's most recognizable sports organizations with real personal stories of ambition, rejection, resilience. How do you make sure there's a balance across the episodes and the season as a whole?
Well, this is so great because it gets at what my approach generally to everything. Like, great stories really are like a good roller coaster ride. Like, you have to go down to go up. So I love, on this show in particular, we get to work with all these performances, these super exciting performances. I spend a lot of time in music videos, so I actually have a lot of fun with that. But personally, my greater strength is actually cutting more emotional narrative scenes. So I get to do both, which is really fun. And that's kind of what I'd say we all look at. And Steph, I'm sure you agree. To balance between the big and like the personal, intimate, reachable levels. So when we're cutting, for example, like a big performance, we generally always see them through the eyes of at least one, maybe two characters. So there's Kelly from New Jersey who's trying to come in. There's Charlie when she got her pulmonary embolism. There was Victoria and her whole personal history. I really connected with Victoria a lot for some reason. I'm not totally sure why. I don't know what that says about me. So we follow the big moments through one character's eyes. So then we can come back down into that reachable level. And we get to draw on each editor has their own strengths. So we're using that to build up this fun roller coaster ride.
So, when you guys are, well, actually, let me start this over because I'm not entirely sure how you guys have your edit base set up. Is it like, do you guys work remotely? Do you guys work in an office? Like, what's your
all remote?
Okay,
remote.
so since you're all remote, and I'm so glad we're talking about remote work as editors because, when you're physically in a space, the communication is a lot different. You're able to walk right across the hall. You guys might have scene cards, and you have it up on a board, and you're able to like chat more easily and like point things out and switch things around. So, like, what is that experience like for you and your team when you're trying to figure out that balance across the season?
Well, we do get together and have chats where we discuss whole episodes and season arcs and things like that. And then story producers will generally break down an episode. Steph, remind me if I'm getting anything wrong here. So we'll work an episode out that way, and then we will sometimes, one person will cut a scene. We'll go over it with the story producer. We might send it off to another editor. We'll take it over. We might send it to another episode. But we are constantly communicating. And then, by the time we get what we feel is appropriate for like a particular episode, we send it on up the chain. And we have like constant meetings. We're constantly talking on Slack. This is one big ad for Slack here. But I feel like even though it's remote, like I don't feel any lack of involvement or attention. When I'm in an office, I chat too much. I talk too much. I'm having too much fun.
Yeah.
I'm not actually I can't focus as well. But honestly, remote work, I can focus. And then when I need to have a conversation, I can do that. I do miss, of course, being able to just be like, hey, can you come look at this? Or check this out, but that's kind of what we do on Slack. It works for me. Once in a while, I wish I could be in the office, but it's for our team. It's really worked well. And I don't know if there's something to that space and then the coming together that really works, but it does for us. I said that already. It works for us.
Nice.
And we are like a work family too.
Yeah.
I think because we've worked, some of us over like different shows now, up to season 3 of like Sweethearts. It's like, I don't know, we've all become like friends. The work environment there is like really healthy. So it's really nice that like we get to just kind of like shoot the shit and like get to know each other.
Yeah. It's a surprisingly really supportive environment. Rare.
And I think that's reflected in the final product. Like I do think that that's what makes our show so good, that it's, we treat each other like really well. We treat each other like humans. And that's also how we edit and how we approach editing our cheerleaders.
Yeah, I'd say we all actually really like the whole philosophy sort of behind this team is like being honest and true and caring about the people that we're telling stories about. I think that doesn't sometimes happen. But we all like care about these characters, for lack of a better word. And I really hope that comes through.
Okay, cool. So moving on to Byron. So Byron, pacing is incredibly important to a series like Lucky. From the fights and car chase scenes to the time jumps and the heated arguments, there's got to be a sequence that challenged you in the edit room, because I feel like there's always something that challenges us on each new project. So what was the hardest sequence for you to find the right rhythm for, and what does that process look like for you?
My real main focus on the series is episode 4. And deliciously, it was a wild, adventurous episode at the same time. And there was a lot to figure out. There was quite a bit to take care of, because it's like all these plates were already spinning. And when you watch the episode, it has one of those, simple plots that go from beginning to end, and it feels really effortless right now. It took a lot of work, though. It really did, because there are, at the heart, there's relationships, and ultimately, the fun part is the latter half, the Bronco chase, which was one of the hardest sequences, to find the rhythm for, because it couldn't simply be fast. And, that was a lot of fun. But the main character, Lucky, is still angry with her husband, Carrie. They haven't reconciled. She's finally found him, and she's tracked him down. He's hiding out in a beach house, in a lavish beach house. And now they're suddenly, on the run together again, almost like Bonnie and Clyde. In some ways they're Bonnie and Clyde, in other ways they're Romeo and Juliet, because of the families that they came from. I had to keep the geography and the danger clear while making sure we never lost that unresolved tension between them. Right before the FBI knocks on the door, she pulls a gun on him, because like any scorned woman, she's really pissed. And they, she tracked him down, and he did this ultimate betrayal, right? It turns out that he roofied her, he drugged her, and left her behind, and left her in danger. And then the feds knock on the door, and they have to kind of escape, but so the other side, right before that, the episode was a little bit like a bottle episode that was all taking place in the living room of this beach house. And that was that pacing, and that was Carrie kind of explaining himself, revealing his past and how his mother had kept him under her thumb. She's a crime boss, and his performance, I wanted it to just be in one single take, so I built it, but I had to build it from several pieces and different takes, because I was stealing pauses and carrying dialogue from other portions. I had Lucky's reactions reshaping the timing between lines, and I kind of like wanted it to feel a little bit. I wanted it to feel like a vulnerable, quiet, intimate bedtime story that was strangely comforting. Him doing his best, trying to explain his actions, even though Lucky is still angry with him. And the risk was slowing everything down and trusting the performances at a point where the plot wants to keep moving. But that intimacy is what begins to reopen Lucky's heart, and is she going to really shoot him? She pulls a gun, and is she going to shoot him, to learn what the passcode is, so that she can return the money. It it helps earn it. What I was getting a little ahead, but that intimacy, she starts to know if she can trust him or not, and then the FBI has tracked her down. She's on their tail too, and both sequences are part of the same emotional progression. They go on the run, and it is an action sequence, but you're still, while they're running together, you're still checking in, their emotion, her anger, and they say some funny things, and you remind the audience that they're still, at odds. And there's a line in the show that says, "Trust no one," and no one in this show can trust one another. Carrie can't even trust Lucky, because he found out that the feds, that the Lucky was working with the feds. That was a really interesting thing when we restructured the diner. There was some suspense between episode 3 and how mine began. There's a diner scene where Agent Rand, where the FBI comes in and she corners Lucky, and she makes Lucky have to work with the feds. So there are all kinds, it's a really, really, really intertwined story. And with the feds banging on the door, they sneak out and get in the Bronco, and they drive it through the garage, and they tear across the beach, going on the run, and during that final chase, when Lucky tells Carrie, it goes through a lot of different stages, but she slowly starts to forgive him. And because at even one moment, his mom, comes in the middle of the chase and says to Carrie, "You can still come back," but he runs away, like a lot of us might. He runs from his parents. But then finally, at the very end, Lucky says, "I don't regret anything about us." It becomes her forgiveness. And that is when it turns into a moment that you might have seen, from like Bonnie and Clyde, or The Alamo, or Thelma and Louise even. And they because they feel like they're cornered. And luckily, Lucky's forgiveness, arrives, before the very end, and I mean, like, I don't know, I hope you've seen the show. I'm gonna feel like I'm spoiling it, because
Can we spoil?
I mean, at least of this episode, because this, yeah, because there's a, because there's a really fatal moment. They've moved from a Bronco and then to a Dodge Charger, and we book in Lucky's story and reveal, in the middle of this car crash, we cut again, and we book in Lucky's story and what happened when she was working with the feds, that her dad was arrested, her Carrie's mom was arrested, and beneath the overturned Charger, there's this beautiful performance that she gives to a dying Carrie that is definitely something that could be an Emmy award-winning performance for her. She gives the performance of her life. For me, finding the right pace, through all these steps means, earning a moment like that, her forgiveness, that when you're cutting a chase or holding on to a performance is really worthy. Her forgiveness, it is funny, because I had been working on the episode for months. Later, and that actual moment in forgiveness had kind of been glanced over, but I revisited it myself. I showed it to Jonathan Tropper, the showrunner. I dug it out a little bit more, and it's a really successful, episode that is really worth being proud of.
I love that you mentioned Bonnie and Clyde and Romeo and Juliet, because I feel like that really sums up that episode perfectly. And especially across these themes of anger, betrayal, and forgiveness. Like with all the parties involved, I feel like those words that you were hitting on really summed it up. And like when Em mentioned earlier, like the roller coaster of emotions in an episode, and having to have a really low and then meeting the high, and I feel like you never know what's happening next. And I was wondering for you, if you could just quickly go into how you were able to keep the audience at the edge of their seats from like scene to scene in those moments when the audience doesn't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, you're um there's a lot of fundamentals going on at the same time. You think that it might be really fancy or advanced, but it's almost like there are some editorial principles that always remain, even in an action sequence, that you can follow the action, you track the action, and that comes from a foundation of follow the bouncing ball. That is one of the 5 um, bullet points of all editing, so that you're able to have this really solid handoff from one character to the next, or one action, one moment thing to the next. And or if you were at a dinner table, and how they pass the potato around, and how the conversation goes, so that you're able to follow, and you feel like you're getting a really honest viewpoint. And you do the same thing in action. You do that, and I do that, and I'm just trying. I look at the footage. The footage is never enough. It's never suffered from. It's very rarely suffered from too much action footage. The street is never too long. The car never, um, you know, doesn't wreck. Like in Lucky, we had cars that wrecked. We had stunt people that were all working in coordination, and all those resources. I often get footage and you wish you could have more, and so you're really, one of the other fundamentals is that you want to kind of experience it, or think of yourself as the first viewer, that you're an audience member, and you're going to show what does the audience want to see next, and that is your job. So you can you're just telling a story. As us editors, we all began sitting around a campfire telling stories, and that is how people hold on to their memories. That is when people have strong minds. They do so from telling stories, and that is what we're practicing here. And I just really try to squeeze as much blood as I can out of any turnip, that any stone that I can, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm glad when I hear. Huh?
Is that pun intended?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Completely. Because but I really love it when directors say, "Boy, I don't know how you got all that action out of that." Even within Lucky, I've had it on other episodes. There was a really great moment when Jet Wilkinson, incredible director, she they had shot some B unit footage with a Russian arm. They spent a whole day filming cars and choreography. They were extending the chase scene. They were kind of just, the idea was they were just giving me footage. And when I uncovered that, when I got it, I thought, my gosh, I'm going to just add it all. And I extended the car chase for another street, another beat entirely. And that was really great. I thought, that's lovely and that's exciting. And or was like, put in all the tire squeals and all, so I put in all the maneuvers from the car, and I had Brandon working with me, and we were making it exciting. We were adding lots of sound. And then I thought, okay, that's exciting, seeing cars but what about the character and the thing that I kind of just was just talking about? And so then I went back to the footage, and the people in the cars were in the cooler, a green screen stage, and they were reacting. Annette Bening was reacting, and but there wasn't much. They hadn't actually shot very much of this moment. They hadn't really thought about it. And then Carrie was sort of reacting. I didn't have a whole lot, quite frankly. And then it's really kind of it's amusing because there's a guy named Dutch, the character who plays Dutch. He shot for the whole episode for about 5 minutes. And I said to my director, I said, gosh, he's going to say, when I started dropping in all these, little clips and putting it together and putting that action sequence together. And I kind of joked to Jet and said, he's going to think he's all through this episode, isn't he? And she's going to go, he's going to love you. He was like, he's going to think he's surprised because he literally shot for 5 minutes and then he was gone. He was done. And so that was really where, because even, he literally had 2 takes of him miming like he's driving, and he's like, what am I doing? Am I wrecking or what am I? And they were like, you're driving around a wreck. And so he literally just had this motion. But then I was able to, find and mine as many frames as I could. But, I added some handheld. I added some shake. Sometimes I messed with the speed, the timing, and so it makes it look natural. There weren't a lot of exterior visual effects in those moments that were needed, that were necessary, because we were able to do it. They were able to do it in the online and the Avid, and just online that, and it was, and it worked out really, really incredibly.
I mean, I'm glad that you're bringing up some of these like really cool challenges, and even like with the camera shake, and like kind of opening up like more of those specific moments. And so I want to open up to the rest of the group, and talk a little more about the creative risks you guys were taking in your projects, or something you want to nerd out about.
When you talk about taking like editorial risks, it's interesting because I feel like, with Avid and stuff, nothing is really a risk to try. That's kind of my theory on it, is you can try anything, and every idea, there's no risk to trying it out because you can just hit undo. Like try it all. Like I think that's the the thing. And it's like you can just find ideas from anywhere. The thing I've found personally that has felt riskier is like when I want to bring something up again that I feel really strongly about, that maybe I've pitched early on in the season, or when working with the showrunner or director, and they're like, oh no thanks, I'm not really interested in that idea. But if I know deep down it's the right move, is like, when do I bring that up again, and how do I bring this up again respectfully, and in the right time and place. And that always, to me, feels like the bigger risk, is like, how do I reposition this now, because I truly, and it's not because I need to be right. I think editing is the most humble job. Like, it doesn't matter whose idea it is. It doesn't matter if I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm there to service the story. I've said this a bunch. I think editors are the guardian of the story. So I will always, and I say this in every interview I do, I'm not like a yes man. I will always be honest. I will always give my opinion. I am more than happy to do it the way you want to do it, but I will always tell you, if I think there is something else. So to me, that's always what I've found the riskiest moment, is like, hey, I had this idea for a restructure. Maybe I pitched it way too soon. I was looking way far down the line and we weren't ready for it yet. It's like, ooh, do you think they remember I said that? If I bring it up again, does that look weird? I always do. I just take the risk, because
sometimes you have to wear baby gloves.
Yeah, and maybe I bring it up in a different way, or I just find the right moment to do it. But I always make sure to bring up what I truly think is something that should be considered for the good of the story. But yeah, any note or like editorial, there's no risk to trying anything, if you ask me.
With America's Sweethearts, that's like actually all we do.
Yeah.
It's almost to a fault where like, we send anywhere from like 5 to 7 cuts to Netflix for each episode. And it's literally been where like,
what?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So there's literally been times where like, we have our cut 7 for like episode 305 or something. And at the literally like 5 days before, we talked to the story team and they're like, we're gonna just kind of like hack it up and try all these things that we thought about like 5 months ago. So it's honestly, in documentary, it's like what you're always doing. Like it kind of like warrants that kind of personality and that kind of like risk taking and experimenting, because you really are finding the story at the whole time that you're editing, really up to like the very end. And you are not going to know if it works unless you like try it and you experiment. And even just like think creatively, like how to use a shot in a way that you weren't expecting to use it. And I don't know. It's just, it's like something that I think is like really fun about what we do, because at first it was kind of hard for me to, I come from like a science background where, there's like a right answer for everything. I was always really good at math and like science, and there's only like one answer. So it like being in a space where that's not the case. And it's actually like, encouraged to experiment like that. It's really freeing and like exhilarating.
That's always been my favorite thing, is when people just like, here's some footage, will you just make a story, we just tell a story, and I'm like, yeah, and I just do whatever I want. And then I get mad.
You surprise yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. But so like for specifics, on America's Sweethearts, I did like 10 versions of a cold open for the show.
Yes.
And it was literally one night, and I just kept sending it back on Slack to the director and the producer, and eventually we were all like, yes, that's the one. But it was really just, it's a little thrilling to just sort of like zip them out like that. So yeah, John, you're about to say something. What are you gonna say?
Sorry. No, and for me too, my thing is like, I'll always take that risk. Like on every project, I'll tell the producers and directors, like, I'm always going to try something, even if I'm way out in left field. I'm going to try it, and if I like it and I'm vibing with it, I'm going to send it to you. And it might be completely not what you were thinking, but then we could maybe pare it back or do a version of it. And I also like creative process. If like you could just come in and be like, no, this is not what I want. Let's rebuild this, and then we rebuild it. But I always like take that swing, and even if people don't like it, then we just rebuild it from there, kind of.
I love that. I mean, one of the things I like to do really early on, which is why I probably have to bring up my ideas again later, is I like to throw out just like whatever comes in my mind when we're really getting into it. Is like I like to throw it out, even if it's not like a fully formed thought, because maybe I'm not going to be the person who finishes forming that. Maybe if I say this thing that's bothering me, or this like weird idea that's coming to my head, I've definitely had people then ask me like, well, what about that? And it's like, I don't really know, but it gets to my mind, and maybe it opens that dialogue. And that's where I think, the collaboration and storytelling and filmmaking is so important, because this one thing, I thought about it, and I'm just going to put it out there and see what that, how that jives in your brain, and how you take that and what you get from that thought. Because if I don't say it, nothing's going to come of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe if I have this little inkling here, somebody else is going to run with that. So I love that you try wild swings, because even if it's not the right thing, it just starts the conversation in a whole different direction.
Thank you. And there's been plenty of times too where like the director's like, oh, I wasn't thinking that. That's not it. But they'll take like a little bit of the idea, right. Even if it's 2 shots of the idea, then we kind of weave it together before it goes to the showrunners.
Honestly, I love that you guys are all mentioning like the same thing about just having like a million different ideas and a million different ways it can go. And my term for it is editor brain, and I I have editor brain so bad, and then I bring it into my personal life. My partner's like, yo, just chill out and pick like 2 things, like please. Like you can just saying it. We can do this, we can do that.
Yeah.
That's why projects never really die.
Never.
You run out of time or money, one or the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't watch my shows when they go to air, because there's so many things that I wanted to do or didn't do or almost did. And I find it physically painful to watch.
It's like the graveyard of bins.
Yes.
It's And the temp music sometimes when
God.
you just, crafted something and lived with it
Yeah.
before it's replaced, and it has to be re-envisioned by
Not
a
that temp
composer.
love.
Mm-hmm.
Love that temp. But it's great. When we're logging our episodes in Sweethearts, we get to give feedback to our composer, and like I will be very like, this at this moment the music was swelling for this reason. Like, can we please bring this back? Because that's one thing where I'm like very strict. I'm like, we have to, music is such an emotionally driven like element in editing that it has to be like once you've crafted it, it has to be right, and you want to preserve that as much as you can once it goes to like the composer.
Exactly. It's like you hope you can just reach out to the composer and just say, we're really just underlining,
Right.
this character, this look, the way that they glance with their eyes. And
Yeah,
it's just like that propels the story.
exactly. Yeah. It's like, bring back this little instrument that was doing like a little sting right here, or like a little pulsing. Yeah, it's fun. It's so much fun.
I feel
Yeah.
like those beats that you guys are talking about, like the emotional moments, like, like a glance or a look, or, even if someone's dancing and they get like thrown up into the air, and like those are all really important moments that like get selected very carefully in an edit room to make the audience feel something. And like those conversations with composers are like so important. And I think like they have their way of being able to try and like translate that in as close a way as possible without like totally ripping off a song.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple more questions for Beef. So we're gonna jump to Lauren. So Lauren, Beef explores how seemingly small moments can spiral into life-changing consequences. What editorial choices do you feel helped reinforce that sense of escalation, growing anxiety, and pending doom throughout the season?
Man, to me, the tone of Beef, and that is the tone of Beef, it really lives in the detail. And something that Byron said earlier that I really resonated with when he was talking about his car chase is that it couldn't just be fast. Building tension, someone might think, oh, we'll cut to it quicker, go to that faster, let's get through this faster, we'll feel more anxious. That's really often not the case. So much of the tension and these moments in Beef happen in these silences, in these pauses, and the reactions. Everything that's going on between these characters, a lot of it's happening in their eyes, their reactions to what the other people are saying, and then how their eyes look when they're saying something, but definitely clearly don't mean it or are thinking about something else. And so we really had to make use of every single frame of footage. We analyzed every frame, every look, every reaction. We had a lot of conversations about perspective character in a scene. With such a large ensemble, every moment for each of these characters had to really count. So we made sure to discuss what we needed to get across in every scene, what that character was going through. And, as the season progresses, the episodes do get more plot driven and more tense and action based. And so we really had to do a lot of deep dive into the character work early on in the season and really make sure that all these moments, these like terrible choices that these characters are making in the moment, that we understood as audience why are they making these choices? Why is Ashley doing this? Well, it comes from hurt, because now we empathize with her, even though she's making terrible decisions. And once you can empathize with a character, even if you don't agree with what they do and these choices have spiraled out to these out of control things, if you understand why they make them, you can buy what happens, and you also are along for the ride, and you start to care about them and root for them. And we wanted people to root for different people throughout the whole season and have those things change. And so I think that we did a lot of that by really focusing on the reactions from the different characters and letting a beat sit for a pause rather than just constantly cutting, or making sure that every line's on camera. It's like, let's make sure the person we need to relate to the most, we see how they're relating to everybody else in the scene.
Yeah.
I
I
love
feel
how you
like
did. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, like you're saying, like you want them to, you want the audience to relate to everyone, and I do feel like B said did such a great job with that like towards the end when everything's so intense, you like can't root for everyone. And so you're like stuck like, oh, if this goes well for this character, it might not for this other one. And it's such a fun, like as an audience member, you're like, oh my God, like you don't know what to do because you're like, okay, I just have to let it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what filmmaking does the best. It helps us relate to each other, right? So like the best thing we can do is take flawed characters and like you guys were talking about the America's Sweethearts, like humanize people, make
Yeah.
others see who they really are deep down, what they actually are going through themselves. And even though they might make bad choices or look a certain way, you know, to the public, they're dealing with all the same stuff we all deal with, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
privately. So like when you can make people feel that and relate to those things, even if I wouldn't make the same choices, let's hope not. I really hope I would not make the same choices, but I kind of get why they did certain things. They were
Mm-hmm.
desperate, they were hurt, they were, you know,
Yeah.
people can make bad choices, but their reasoning behind it doesn't always come from a terrible place. So,
Mm-hmm.
Like you're mentioning really the dramas essentially in the unspoken moments, and I think even in the texting, like I just thought that was so fascinating how they were able to, just the acting was so crazy, and that they were able to get those small moments across in their faces and in their and in their body language when things were happening. Obviously, like they're not actually like texting each other, but like
you
I
know,
just
the
thought it was so
texting, the
cool.
phone usage, I'm really proud of like all the phone usage in the season because we really wanted it to feel like how people use their phones in real life. And it also gave us so many ways to play, right? In the edit, we changed what texts were sent, who they were texting, you know, what they're scrolling on their phone. We could
Yeah.
really experiment with that. And then, you know, with the sound effects, there's like a favorite moment I have where like Austin's like laying, you know, working out while eating chips. And then like he's mad. So he starts typing. And I just remember even, you know, from the offline and the temp, like I had my assistant editor Josh, I was like, add a sound for every time he hits those buttons, you know, and you just feel it with the sound, how mad he is, how fast he's like typing back. And I just love that because it feels really real. And also the phone usage it let us do so much, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and clear up so many things and expand on things. And really, you know, what people look at on their phones is very telling. What they're Googling, who they're messaging, you know, all of that stuff you really get to see inside a person's brain by seeing what they're doing on their phone, you know.
Even just the swiping through the apps and like sneaking on to like WhatsApp and Instagram to like
Well, it's
chat
like
side bay.
Ashley throws herself out of a car because someone didn't follow her back on Instagram but followed her boyfriend. You know, it's like, but that online behavior told her what was really going on, you know. So it's like I'm so glad he brought the phone usage because it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Last question before we get into the final one for everybody. So now we're going down to John. So you've worked across both scripted comedy and documentary. So we have like screenplay and actors versus digging through like 1,000 hours of footage to find the story. So considering their differences, how do you find like approaching those emotional truths in these like two different forms of storytelling?
Um, like what Stephanie and Em said earlier, it's like if you care about your characters and telling their side of the story, I think that goes for both genres. Where with like documentary world, you're going just through hours of footage and like you're telling this true story and you want to stay true to the subject of the documentary or the topic of the documentary. And depending on the documentary, of course, like your main character might not be liked, but you're telling the bad stuff that they did kind of, but you want to just stay true to the emotion of them and then just sifting through all of their like interviews and all of that stuff. But then if you go on to like the scripted side of it, you still want to like these characters are still real to us and the audience members. So I go with the mindset of like trying to be as true to these characters that we create in the scripted world because we do care about them. On like Survival of the Thickest, like I care, like I thought they were my friends at a certain point because I've been with them for 3 years and just like staying true to who they are and like not making certain decisions because like Mavis wouldn't do that. We're not going to do that, and staying true to her story arc. And then in the documentary world, you want to stay true to the story you're telling, because I like to be part of documentaries that like these are the facts and these are like I don't want to manipulate the audience with the documentary and get them to feel a certain way, like just to tell the true side of it. But I do have to say, because like I did documentaries earlier on, like what I've learned from documentaries has helped me tremendously in the scripted world, even because like a lot of my scripted comedies have been like very improv heavy, and like Michelle Bateau, and like she's one of the best improv actors that I've worked with, and she'll just come in and give you like 6 or 7 different takes. So what I've like learned from documentary world of like they only did that once, you have to make it work, like really helped me in the script, in like an improv scripted world I should say, where like Michelle came in and just said like this super funny thing, but like we only got half coverage of it on one side, or like we don't have it's if it wasn't cross shot, we don't have the reaction shots from the other cast members, so we're trying to create that. But back to the original question, it's just staying true to the world, trying to stay as true to the world as possible, whether it's a real story or a scripted story that I feel is real because I'm emotionally attached to the characters in the story arc.
Yeah. So something I do want to touch on that I think is really cool, and like all of you guys are working on different aspects of storytelling. So like John, you're working in comedy spaces, you're working in documentary spaces, and I feel like sometimes filmmakers and editors and all sorts of people feel like they have to like stay in like one thing. And would you be able to just speak a little bit more about how you got into like both of those and what made you feel like you could take the leap and start opening yourself up to more opportunities outside of one thing?
I do think that each different genre helps you, like in certain aspects, because like there's montages in documentaries, there's montages in scripted, and just like navigating it all. And most of my work has been on like the comedic scripted side. But like so working in documentaries, I feel like that almost helped me like build my courage to try different stuff, because you're working in a world where sometimes you don't have that footage. So it was like I need to try this, and it like allowed me to try to like open up myself creatively, sorry, to like building the moment of the scene. But I do think there are certain people that like just want to stay in one subject and like run with that. Like there are people that want to be just documentary editors. There are people that want to just be reality editors. There are people that just want to be drama editors, TV editors. But I think like it's a lot of it is just like meeting the right people to give you the opportunity. So like I was working in the documentary world, and then I met someone who gave me a shot on a comedy show, and it kind of just like bubbled from there.
Cool, cool. Okay, last question. So what lessons or tidbits did you learn along the way on your previous projects that you brought into the timeline or even into your bullpens? Also the virtual bullpens as well.
You mean Slack?
Yes.
Mhm.
How to put
You know,
the
I
ad out
kind of
for it.
touched on this earlier, but to me, it really is try everything, try crazy ideas. I was on a project once, and an idea came in from a producer, and it was to make a very, it was a very heavy dialogue scene, very dramatic, lots of tears, to take this scene and take out all the dialogue and make it silent.
Mm.
That's like a wild swing. And I will, say I was not sure if that would work. I had no idea. But my instinct is to always try everything. So I said, the director, I said, let me just try it. Let me try it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll tell them it doesn't work. We can say we tried it. When I say try it, though, you have to actually try. You can't just be like, here, I took all the dialogue out. Like, there you go, it doesn't work. So like I actually tried to make it work. And like it was brilliant. It's how it ended up in the film, and one of my favorite scenes. And it was a brilliant idea. And I like to think back to that one of like, take the wild swings. It's okay if it doesn't work. But if you don't actually try it and actually try to take that idea and run with it, you could be missing out on something really great.
Yeah.
Can I just say real quick, Lauren, when I was in film school, very briefly, we had an exercise where we used like after school special footage to cut one scene, right? It was like a girl telling her boyfriend she was pregnant, right? So everybody cut it, shot, reverse shot, very straightforward. And then there was one guy from Sardinia, and he didn't speak English very well. And his version was almost entirely body language. And it was like the best one. Like that was like a lesson I learned very early. It was brilliant, and I've never ever forgotten that. So I look to take dialogue out almost everywhere and just focus on looks, faces, body movement. That's really where people are saying things. People say the opposite of what they mean. They say things that are adjacent to what they mean. It's really all other stuff. So it's funny that you told that story because
that's awesome.
Yeah,
is he an editor
that.
now? I hope so.
I have no idea. I don't know what happened to him. I hope so. It's good.
That's incredible insight. That's cool.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That is so true because a lot of literally so many great actors are like, I don't need to say that line, when they're that strong. And then, because that is really cinema when you can just give a look. So that's really, 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 that's so cool that you had that experience. Being subtle is, you really, really, really need to learn how to have a fine hand, because you can do just a little too much. You can blow it up just a little too much, because the viewer's eye, guiding the viewer's eye so that each cut lands cleanly, that eye trace and composition are incredibly important. Sometimes I've put my thumb on my screen. I did it last night so that I could match from when I was cutting from one character to another, so that the eye trace was seamless, so that you want the audience looking in the right place before the cut happens, so they experience the story rather than feeling the mechanics of the edit.
For me, I feel like I rely a lot on like my emotions. So really I think like generally I really try to get in like the perspective of our subjects, and I always call it like there's like different names I have for like different things, but I always want to feel like if I'm not feeling it, like I'm very empathetic. So if I'm not feeling the emotion that I'm trying to like have in the edit, then it's just not done, and I have to like continue pushing. But I get very emotionally invested in what I'm doing. So if something's funny, I need to make sure I'm like cracking up. If something's sad, I need to make sure I'm like near tears. Like I've been in edits where like I'm literally crying through what I'm doing because of like how much I'm feeling, like, and that's what I want to get out of the audience, right? If I can't feel it, then I'm not gonna know if like my audience is gonna feel it. So that's kind of like what I always kind of like try to bring into every project, and like rely on just, what is like bringing attention to me, like what I'm reacting to with the footage, and then like how can I like emphasize the emotional impact of it in the edit.
That's similar to what I would say. I really trust my instincts, and if I feel it, then somebody else is going to feel it. Sort of, John, this sort of dovetails kind of off what you said earlier. Like when I go into documentary, and this is specific to documentary, like I really have to kind of love everybody that I'm cutting, or I can't tell their story properly. Right. I worked on a show about the fire fraud guy. And I kind of had to like love him in a way to tell his perspective properly, even though he did some bad things. So I take that everywhere. And so I lean into those things, and I lean into the emotion sometimes a little too much. This is an aside here, but I worked on a show where Harrison Ford was like a celebrity, like correspondent. And he went to Indonesia to like learn about palm oil and stuff. But he came in to work on the VO with one of the producers, and I showed him his ending. And he was like, I don't like it. It was too sentimental. And I was like, oh man, Harrison Ford just told me he doesn't like my work. But it was a story that required a sentimental, like a hopeful ending. And luckily they used my ending and not Harrison Ford's ending.
You brought up something really interesting about loving each character, finding a way to love them.
Yeah.
And over the weekend, there was a screening at Vidiots with Michael Miller, and he's showing Miller's Crossing with AC Presents. And he's actually my mentor since I attended UNCSA, so it's been like 10 years. And so I've got to hear like all this knowledge from him, and to hear him talk about like, as an editor, you need to love all of your characters regardless of who they are and what they've done, and to like give them their time on screen and really give them their story. And I think that's so important, and something that you guys have all talked about is just being like guardians of the story and protecting the characters and really coming through and like being objective. I think that's like the best thing that we can provide as editors, is like being that objective voice and like providing options. Like, here's the kitchen. But yeah, I'm just so glad we got to have this conversation, and I just want to thank you guys so much for coming here today. And that's all the time we have, unfortunately. So thank you to our panelists, Stefanie, Byron, Lauren, and John. And thank you for just talking about your really amazing shows. And thank you to Impact 24 for putting on this panel. And to all of you watching, we'll see you soon.